Somewhere in America right now, a homeowner is pulling a plant out of their backyard that could land them a $10,000 fine. They have no idea, because the most dangerous plants in America do not look dangerous. They look like something you would buy at a garden center, something a neighbor might give you as a cutting, something that has been growing quietly along your fence line for years. Over the past century, the United States federal government and individual states have placed restrictions, bans, and outright prohibitions on dozens of plants that were once welcomed into American homes and gardens. Some of these plants fed families, some beautified neighborhoods. A few were promoted by the government itself as solutions to national problems. Every single one became a problem that America is still paying for today. These are 20 plants that changed how America thinks about what it allows to grow in its soil. Number 20, castor bean. Walk through any American neighborhood in the 1880s and you would have seen castor bean plants everywhere. They were status symbols. Victorian homeowners competed to grow the tallest ones, some reaching 12 feet in a single season, with broad tropical leaves that made northern gardens feel exotic and lush. The plant had genuine utility beyond decoration. Pressed castor oil was a household essential. It lubricated early machinery, conditioned leather, and served as a digestive remedy that doctors recommended well into the 20th century. What Victorian gardeners did not fully appreciate was what remained after the oil was extracted. The processing byproduct, ricin, is among the most toxic substances found anywhere in nature. A quantity smaller than a grain of salt is sufficient to kill a human being. The colorful seeds that made the plant so visually appealing were the primary danger, particularly to children who had no reason to know they were lethal. As American families moved into closer suburban proximity after the Second World War, the risk calculation changed permanently. The castor bean quietly vanished from American garden culture, not through any single dramatic ban, but through the steady disappearance of a plant whose beauty no longer justified its danger. Number 19, kudzu. In 1935, the United States Soil Conservation Service had a problem. Years of destructive farming practices had stripped millions of acres of southern soil bare. Rain was washing it away. Fields were becoming useless. The solution they chose was kudzu, a thick-rooted vine from Japan that had been displayed at the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition and immediately enchanted American gardeners with its large leaves and fragrant purple flowers. For erosion control, kudzu performed exactly as promised. Its deep root system gripped soil with remarkable tenacity. The government paid farmers $8 per acre, serious money during the Depression, to plant it. By the 1940s, over 1 million acres had been deliberately seeded across the American South. What the Soil Conservation Service did not model was what kudzu would do once the erosion problem was solved and the planting stopped. Nothing stopped kudzu. It grows at a biological pace that has no equivalent among plants adapted to North American ecosystems. 60 feet in a single growing season, a foot of new growth on a warm day. It climbs telephone poles and pulls down their lines under accumulated weight. It consumes forests, wrapping individual trees until no sunlight reaches the leaves below, killing everything it touches. Millions of acres across the American South, land the government paid farmers to plant, now costing billions of dollars per year in control efforts, lost timber, and agricultural damage.
Number 18.
Giant hogweed. Giant hogweed arrived in British gardens from the Caucasus region in the early 1800s, celebrated for its extraordinary scale and architectural drama. Victorian plant enthusiasts shipped it to America shortly afterward. The danger was entirely invisible. Number 17. Opium poppy. The history of the opium poppy in America is long, complicated, and difficult to summarize fairly. These poppies have been cultivated by human civilizations for over 5,000 years. Ancient Egyptian physicians documented their medical applications. The seeds, containing negligible concentrations of any active compound, were standard baking ingredients in American kitchens well into the 20th century. The flowers themselves rank among the most beautiful produced by any annual plant. The plant also produces the latex from which morphine and heroin are refined. Federal restrictions on opium poppies tightened steadily through the 20th century as America's relationship with opiates grew increasingly troubled. The legal situation today is nuanced, but the practical reality for American gardeners is that deliberately growing opium poppies in quantity carries serious legal exposure. A plant that fed, medicated, and decorated American homes for generations became legally fraught because of the chemistry it carries inside its seed pods. Number 16. Japanese knotweed. Japanese knotweed arrived in Britain in 1850 as a gift from a Dutch botanist. It spread across Europe within decades and reached American shores shortly after. Nurseries sold it as an attractive, fast-growing screen plant. Landowners planted it along embankments and property lines for quick coverage. What nobody in the Western world understood was that Japanese knotweed had no biological controls outside its native Asian range. In Japan, specialized insects, fungi, and soil conditions keep it in check. In Europe and America, nothing touches it. The root system of an established Japanese knotweed colony extends 3 meters deep and 10 meters horizontally from any visible growth. Number 15. Water hyacinth. At the 1884 Cotton States Exposition in New Orleans, water hyacinth was among the exotic plants on display, a floating aquatic plant with glossy round leaves and lavender flower spikes of genuine beauty. American visitors were enchanted by it. Many took cuttings home. Within a decade, it had spread across Florida waterways, placed by admirers into local ponds and lakes without a second thought. Water hyacinth grows faster than almost any other plant on Earth under warm conditions. Its population doubles every 12 days. One plant becomes 2, 2 become 4. These mats block all light from reaching below the water surface. Oxygen levels collapse, fish die, boat traffic stops. Water intake systems for municipalities clog. The Florida state government spent over $14 million in a single decade attempting to control a plant that arrived as a decorative piece at a world exposition. Number 14. Coca. The coca plant is not a drug. This distinction matters and is frequently lost in American legal discussions about it. The coca leaf, small, waxy, resembling a tea plant, contains a modest concentration of cocaine alkaloids alongside dozens of other compounds. Indigenous Andean communities have chewed coca leaves for over 8,000 years for altitude adjustment, mild stimulation, and ceremonial purposes. The leaves are sold openly in Bolivian and Peruvian markets, the way coffee beans are sold in American supermarkets. Cocaine is produced through an industrial chemical extraction process that has no connection to traditional coca use. American federal law makes no distinction between the leaf and the extracted substance. The Controlled Substances Act classifies coca plants under Schedule 2, treating a single plant in a private greenhouse as equivalent to cocaine manufacturing.
Number 13. Purple loosestrife. Purple loosestrife was not introduced to America carelessly. European settlers brought it deliberately as a medicinal herb with a documented history of treating wounds and digestive complaints. Beekeepers valued it for its abundant late-season nectar. The plant is unambiguously beautiful. Dense spikes of magenta-purple flowers rising 4 to 7 feet above wetland edges. Each mature plant produces between 2 and 3 million seeds annually. 2 to 3 million. The seeds disperse by water, wind, and on the feet of waterfowl. New plants establish readily in any wet, disturbed soil. The ecological consequence is the conversion of biologically diverse native wetlands into loosestrife monocultures. Native cattails, sedges, and wetland grasses, which provide food, shelter, and nesting material for dozens of wetland species, cannot compete.
Number 12. Peyote. The peyote cactus grows slowly in the Chihuahuan Desert of Texas and northern Mexico. Small, spineless, a soft green button emerging from dry soil that gives no outward indication of its significance. Peyote contains mescaline, a psychedelic compound central to the ceremonial and spiritual practices of Native American communities across the Southwest for over 5,000 years. The Native American Church uses peyote as a sacrament in religious ceremonies, with a documented history of therapeutic benefit for addiction recovery among tribal communities. The federal government banned peyote under the Controlled Substances Act. Number 11. Giant salvinia. Giant salvinia is a fern that reproduces through fragmentation. Any separated piece establishes an independent colony. Boats moving between water bodies carry fragments on their hulls. Birds carry fragments on their feet. Once introduced to a connected water system, giant salvinia spreads faster than removal programs can respond. Under optimal conditions, giant salvinia accumulates into floating layers a foot or more thick. Nothing survives below these mats.
Number 10. Tree of Heaven. Ailanthus altissima arrived in America in 1784. Brought by a Philadelphia gardener who admired its rapid growth. By the 19th century, it was planted in cities across the eastern United States as a street tree that tolerated pollution and urban neglect. It releases allelopathic compounds through its roots and leaf litter that suppress the germination of competing plants, giving it a consistent advantage over native species in disturbed environments. The more immediate crisis is the spotted lanternfly. This invasive insect from Asia, which arrived in Pennsylvania in 2014 and has spread across the mid-Atlantic and northeastern states, uses Tree of Heaven as its primary reproductive host. The lanternfly devastates fruit crops, hardwood forests, and vineyards.
Number 9. Autumn olive. The Natural Resources Conservation Service promoted autumn olive planting to American farmers through the 1950s and 60s with genuine conservation objectives. It fixed nitrogen in poor soils. Its berries provided food for game birds. Its dense growth controlled erosion on degraded slopes. It performed every function it was planted to perform. It also reproduced with a biological enthusiasm that nobody had adequately measured. A single mature autumn olive produces between 60 and 80,000 seeds per year, each readily consumed and dispersed by birds. Within 2 decades, autumn olive was appearing far outside any planted area, in forests, fields, and natural areas across the eastern United States. The government that promoted it now funds programs to remove it. Number 8. Water spinach. Water spinach is one of the most nutritionally complete leafy vegetables grown in tropical Asia, high in iron, calcium, and vitamins. It has fed rural populations across Southeast Asia for centuries. The United States Department of Agriculture places it on its federal noxious weed list. In warm American climates, particularly across the Gulf Coast and Hawaii, water spinach establishes aggressively in any connected water system. Its hollow stems float, carrying viable fragments downstream to establish new colonies. Several states classify unauthorized possession of water spinach seeds as a criminal matter, a vegetable that feeds hundreds of millions across Asia, treated as contraband in parts of America.
Number 7. Cot. Cot is a shrub. It looks like many other shrubs. If you saw it growing in a hedge, you would have no reason to look twice. Its leaves contain cathinone, a naturally occurring stimulant compound. In Yemen, Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya, cot chewing is a social ritual with cultural roots stretching back centuries, as normalized as afternoon tea in Britain. Number 6. Multiflora rose. The United States Department of Agriculture recommended multiflora rose to American farmers from the 1930s through the 1960s. Dense, thorny growth that contained livestock, provided wildlife cover, and required no maintenance once established. State highway departments planted it along roadsides. Conservation agencies distributed free seedlings. A single plant generates over 1 million seeds annually, each dispersed by birds. The canes, growing up to 15 feet, create impenetrable thickets that shade out every plant beneath them. The government that planted it now funds programs to remove it. Number 5. Hydrilla. Hydrilla entered American waterways through the aquarium trade in the 1950s, released by aquarium owners who disposed of their tanks into local water bodies. Under warm conditions, it grows 2 inches per day. Dense beds fill water columns completely, underwater vegetation so thick that propeller-driven watercraft cannot pass through it. Water intake screens for power plants and municipal water systems clog within days of establishment. The United States Army Corps of Engineers has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on hydrilla control in Florida alone since the 1970s. Complete eradication from any established water body has never been achieved. Number 4. Betelnut palm. Areca catechu, the betelnut palm, is the source of the world's 4th most widely consumed psychoactive substance after caffeine, alcohol, and nicotine. Between 600 million and 1 billion people chew betelnut regularly across South Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific Islands. Long-term betelnut use is associated with significantly elevated rates of oral and esophageal cancers. The World Health Organization classifies it as a Group 1 carcinogen. American restrictions on cultivation reflect public health concerns that took decades of research to establish clearly. Number 3. Garlic mustard.
Aliaria petiolata crossed the Atlantic with European settlers in the 1860s, not accidentally, but deliberately. The settlers knew this plant. They had grown up eating it. The leaves added a pleasant flavor to early spring salads when preserved winter food had exhausted its appeal. Garlic mustard produces allopathic compounds that specifically disrupt the mycorrhizal fungi that native North American tree species depend on to absorb nutrients from soil. In European forests where garlic mustard evolved, local trees developed tolerance. American oaks, maples, and ashes have no such adaptation. It has spread to 34 states and every Canadian province with forested land.
Number 2. Brazilian Elodia. Egeria densa was marketed to American aquarium owners throughout the 20th century under the trade name Anacharis. Inexpensive, readily available, and genuinely useful for home fish tanks. Aquarium owners who released their tanks into local waterways unknowingly established Brazilian Elodia in water bodies across the country. It grows year-round in water temperatures that slow most aquatic plants. Dense beds develop within a single growing season. Unlike most invasive aquatic plants, Brazilian Elodia continues growing actively in cold water, making it particularly difficult to control in northern states where winter was expected to provide a natural check. It provided no such check.
1. Water chestnut. Not the water chestnut found in cans in American supermarkets. The water chestnut that earned federal prohibited status is Trapa natans, a floating annual with diamond-shaped surface leaves that arrived in northeastern America in the 1870s, introduced to a Cambridge, Massachusetts pond by a botanist who simply admired it. The surface mats it produces block light penetration completely. Native submerged vegetation dies. The work is never finished. These 20 plants share a common thread that runs through American agricultural history. Each one arrived with a reason behind it: trade, admiration, government program, cultural tradition, culinary value. Each one was welcomed by gardeners, by agencies, by families who simply wanted something useful or beautiful growing in their yards. The consequences came later, sometimes decades later, by which point the plant had established itself so thoroughly that removal became the work of generations. America is still doing that work. The most important lesson these 20 plants leave behind is not about invasive species or drug policy or toxic chemistry. It is about the gap between how a plant behaves when it arrives and what it becomes when nothing stands in its way. Subscribe to Grown in America. Every week, the real stories behind what grows in American soil.